G'day modelers, it's Chris and this is Model Railway Automations. Now in this video, making Model Railway EXRail automations more readable, we will be expanding on the use of aliases. By using aliases, you can write code that is reusable in many places in your automations, thus making your automations simpler to read. But before we do that, I just want to do a quick recap on the first 3 videos. Okay, so we started our coding journey in video number 3, and it was a simple shuttle script. The Loco started, it ran for 10 seconds forward, and then stopped and ran for 10 seconds backward. And that was really all it was. We did 2 of them, one with sound and one without sound. The reading of the code was made simpler because we commented the code so that we could tell what was actually going on when we stepped through the code. The main disadvantage with this approach, you can't accurately predict where the Loco is going to stop. If the track's a little bit dirty, it will hesitate as it goes along, and therefore the distance it will travel will be different each time. Okay, in video 4, we introduced current sensing block detection and infrared sensors at either end of the track to stop the locomotive. However, we still stayed with only 2 files. The myAutomation file contained all the code necessary for running this particular automation. We had 2 automations, one with sound and one without. We had an automation to take the Loco to the starting point, and it had an automation that would stop all automation. So this technique is more accurate and has lots of advantages over the video number 3. Okay, now we're into video 5, splitting model railroad automations into smaller files with aliases. As you can see, I've now got the config file, which we had before, myRoster, myAutomation, myAutos, mySeqs, and myUtilityCode. So let's just quickly step through them. The config file hasn't really changed that much. myRoster is a new file, and in it we've got a list of all of my locos. This is worth putting all your locos in, even if they're not being used in an automation, because they will appear in your throttle. myAutomations has been condensed quite a bit. At the top it has a list of the devices that need to be configured, a couple of displays and a couple of I/O expanders. The rest down here are the included files, the ones you see at the top, so they have to be referenced. Next we've got myAutos, so these are the automations that we're going to be running, and each of them call a sequence that appears in the sequences section. And lastly we've got myUtilityCode, and this is where I've got various pieces of code that don't belong in a sequence or the automations, so that's where that code lives. Now before we move on to video 6, I've been asked by one of the guys that have subscribed to the channel to talk a little bit about the OLED displays. First of all, in configuration, you've got an OLED driver, so that has to be there. Next, in the myAutomation, you've got 2 references to OLED displays, display 1 and display 2. So computers start from 0 and count up. So this piece of code is quite critical because it tells you the display number, the address, and the size of the screen. Now to get the display 2 to work, what you do is you write this method here: screen number 1, which is actually the second screen, line number 1, and that's what we're going to put on it. And as you can see, for following the sensors, I've done this a fair few times. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 0 position is the name of the layout. Sorry about the camera shake. Obviously I need to get a tripod. As you can see, as the train passes each of the sensors, it updates the screen. Okay, so starting with the config file, there hasn't been any changes. Now in myRoster, we've made one change. For Loco number 9366, we've changed the function headings. This Loco is a Broadway Limited Loco, and the functions are different to the Walthers Locos that I'm running, which have all the same headings for each Loco. Next, we'll look at the myAutomation file, and there's a couple of small changes down the bottom. The call clear screen screen function was outside the auto start, and I've put that now inside. Now clear screen now has a reference to the end of it. It's a sequence and it's inside the myUtilityCode, which is what that stands for. We then set a virtual pin for Loco sound, and we set the root caption for Automation 1002, turn sound off. I'll get into more of that when we get further into it. Here in myAutos file, we're starting to make things a little bit simpler. You'll notice that it no longer has comments. Now the reason for that is that I'm using aliases and writing the code in such a way that you can read what it actually is, so it makes it simpler from that point of view. Now we've dropped two of the automations. Previously, each of the two automations that we're now running had a automation for sound on and sound off, and we're handling that process differently. The Loco startup and shut down is a function in the aliases file, and by naming it this way it's easy to read, so you know exactly what's going on, and that's going to be the theme for the coding for the rest of this video. mySeqs has also had a pretty substantial haircut. This is the sequence for video 6, and here's the sequence for video 5. If you look at this column here, you can straight away see there's a lot less code in video 6, and mostly that's to do with being able to turn on and off the sound with the Locos. The rest of the sequence is fairly much the same. So clear screen is to clear the screen on screen 2, so that then we can start writing new messages. So that happens at the beginning of the Loco going forward and the Loco traveling in reverse. Okay, so let's look at automation Loco sound. First of all, I'm going to split it out a little bit just to make it a bit easier to read. In your throttle, you'll have an automation called Loco sound. If statements are a very handy function. You can have if not, else, and end if. In this case, we're checking to see what the virtual pin is, Loco sound, and if it's not true, in other words, if its status is not high, we're going to set the pin to high because it's low to come into here. We're going to call the Loco startup and shut down sequence, and we're going to change the caption on the button inside the throttle. If it was low, then we would go this way. We would reset it to high, call the Loco startup function, and the button caption would change to turn sound on. Let's have a quick look at the throttle and seeing that in action. Note that the current state of the Loco sound button is turn sound off. When it's pressed, it changes to turn sound on, and again back to off, which means that the VP Loco sound is changing from low to high and back again. So just a little bit of recapping on if statements. At the beginning of this section, I said there was if not, else, and if. In actual fact, there are 25 more commands using if Loco, for example, and with that you put the number in. I'll show you more about if statements and how they work when we go to the next section in myAliases. Going over this one again, if not the value, then we're going to set a value. We're going to call a routine in the alias section. We're changing the caption else, which is the opposite of the if not value. Then you reset it, call again, and change the caption. End if and done. It's pretty straightforward. I've also included a link to the documents where you can find the other 25 if statements. The last thing you can do is you can nest them. So you can have a if statement that sits inside this, and it can also be a multi-tiered with if, else, end if within the if statement. So we'll show you that now in myAliases. Okay, so you can set up an alias so it's more readable. The function for turning on headlight is 0. You would say on F on and the number. So if it was 0, it would turn the headlight on, and if it was off, if that was 0, it would turn the headlight off. So what we're doing here with an alias is we're typing in a name that makes sense to us. Now I've sort of prefixed that with FN standing for function. So function headlight, by tying it into F on or F off, we're turning on the headlight and turning off the headlight. The next function is the bell function. Now this is a little bit more complex. We've got a bell on and a bell off, and we're doing it as a sequence. What we're saying here is if Loco's sound is true, then we'll turn on the bell. In the next one, we're saying for bell off, the sequence, again, if sound is on, we need to turn the bell off. Both of these sequences end with returns because you're only calling it once. And in the code, what you do is you use the word call in front of it. Now this is clear screen, so we're calling the clear screen alias. So the alias clear screen, when you call it, it runs through this sequence and sets the lines on the screen to being blank. Getting back to the functions, so bell on and bell off is very readable, easy for you to understand. The same with horn on and horn off. Coupler crash is just the noise that a Loco makes when it's mating with some cars. Brake F5 at the moment is not being used by any of the Locos that I use, so it's in a ditch lights on and ditch lights off. Now in this case we're looking at a Loco and we've got an if statement nested within an if statement. So if it's Loco 3, which is the default for new Locos, and if 6 is Walther's function number for ditch lights, we can turn it on. The Broadway Limited Loco that I have doesn't have ditch lights, so we're leaving that blank. And if it's not that Loco and it's not this one, then it's else. And again, Walther's has 6 as its ditch lights on. The same questions are asked in the if statement, except we're now turning the ditch lights off. Manual compressor is function 7. Now here we've got startup and shutdown sequence. Here we're using the VP Loco sound. We're testing whether we've turned the sound on. If it's on and it's Loco 3, we'll use F8, which is start sequence for Walther's. If it's not Loco 3, then we'll check and see if it's 9366, and if it's not that, then it goes back to the Walther's. The same thing applies. We go else, we go and ask the same question and we turn it off. So all of those references to various Loco functions as aliases now makes the code a lot more readable. We're not looking and having to remember numbers, etc. Now I'm only using one virtual pin, and that's for Loco sound, so we're giving it the number 4000, and because it's a virtual pin, it doesn't actually connect to any hardware. The block pins, block number 2, pin number 233, that's the actual pin number on the side, so I write it this way so that I can trace where the block is connected to an I/O expander. On my little test track, got 4 blocks that I'm testing, even though I've got 8 blocks, and I've got 6 infrared sensors. IR for infrared sensor, pin number 216, and it's connecting to the I/O port 216. So that's the alias section, and that with all those in place, coming back to sequences, it's now really easy to read what's going on. Horn on, horn off, block at when the Loco hits at block 7 and that virtual pin, it now speeds the Loco up to speed step 20. So all of the code is quite readable and makes it a lot easier. Now the question you may ask is, why go to all of this trouble here? And for me, I'm going to be having 4 different Locos running 2 goods and 2 passenger trains running in opposite directions over the one piece of track with 4 passing sidings and 89 different blocks. So having a system where I can read out the block number or read the sensors. I will also be adding in the same type of system for points. It becomes more readable and it becomes easier to trace and fix both coding problems and hardware problems. So that's why we want to break it out. Now, rather than having the if statements to do with sound that I had before, in the sequence. By taking out that and putting this piece of code in place, I reduced all of that code in the sequence that I showed you earlier in the video. If you're only doing something fairly simple, no, you don't necessarily have to go to all this trouble. You can just write it longhand in the myAutomation, like we did in the first two videos where we talked about code, video 3 and video 4. But in video 5, the sequences became more complex. Because my layout's going to have so many blocks and Locos running in different directions and passing each other at passing sidings, I can now read where the Loco is and whether the track is occupied and keep control over what's happening and in what order it happens. Okay, so that's it for video number 6. In video number 7, we're going to be looking at using servos as point motors. Because I use electrofrogs, I need to have a way of changing the polarity. So that's where relays come into effect. Now I've got a couple of nifty ways of making sure that the relays activate in the middle of the throw. Support the people who supported us. The supplier's web addresses will be listed below in the description. Thanks again for watching. I'm Chris and this is Railroad Automation. So don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon, and please give us a like. Have a great day and happy modeling.